Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar focused on the local waterfront revitalization program. My name is Stephanie Wojtowicz. I'm the director of the Division of Planning at the Department of State's Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure. And I'm joined today by Amy DiGaetano, the co-manager of our local waterfront revitalization program and the LWRP CFA coordinator. So today's webinar will cover the local waterfront revitalization program, and we'll also be hosting additional webinars that will go into greater detail into our Brownfield Opportunity Area program that starts actually at 10:30 today, and then our Smart Growth programs, which will be on Monday, June 5th. And you can find the registration information for those webinars on our funding and bidding website. So a few housekeeping things to go over today. Today attendees are muted, but you can ask questions in the chat section of the webinar. So down at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the little chat button or the chat bubble, and just click on that and simply enter your question into the box, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Please make sure as well to send your chat to all the panelists. So we have a couple panelists online that will be checking questions, so make sure that they go to all of them so we can see your questions. And hopefully we'll be able to get to all your questions, and if we can't, we are recording everything and we will be providing answers in our formal written question and answers, which will be posted to our website on July 7th. And we'll go over some more of that information at the end on how you can submit your questions in written format. And also just note today, if you were on our first webinar, the same thing today is we won't be able to answer any specific questions about eligibility. Eligibility is not always straightforward, and that eligibility will be based on the information that's provided in the application. So please refer to the LWRP request for applications for that eligibility criteria. And then again, if you have any additional questions that come to mind after the webinar, again, as I mentioned, you can write in to the formal Q&A. So I'm going to turn this over to Amy DiGaetano, who is going to get into our details on the LWRP.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Today's webinar, I'll provide an overview of the Department of State's 2023 Local Waterfront Revitalization Grant Program, including eligibility and evaluation criteria. For more in-depth information on grant requirements,
keep going. And we'll see.
It's recommended all applicants read the entire request for applications. The RFA and additional grant application resources are available on the DOS funding and bid opportunities website at the link shown here. Next slide. The LWRP program provides technical and financial assistance for planning and implementation projects which implement the New York State Coastal Management Program and to achieve more resilient and accessible waterfront communities. Funding is available for the following grant categories: preparing or updating an LWRP, updating an LWRP to be more resilient to climate risks, preparing an LWRP component, including a watershed management plan, and implementing a local waterfront revitalization program or a completed LWRP component. Our first webinar, which was held on May 24th, provided more details on each of these grant categories. We're in the process of posting that to the DOS website along with the RFA, and recommend that you access these resources if you want more individual information on these grant categories. For this year's grant round, we have $16.3 million available to fund community and waterfront revitalization projects, with up to $2 million of that for updating existing LWRPs to be more resilient to climate risks. Here are some resources for LWRP preparation. So for applicants considering applying for funding to prepare an LWRP, we encourage you to visit the DOS LWRP website to gain a better understanding of the LWRP planning process and requirements. This website includes an instructional video providing an introduction to LWRPs, a guidance manual for preparing LWRPs, case studies, and example approved LWRPs. For applicants interested in watershed management planning, we encourage you to visit our DOS Water Resource Management website at the link shown here. This website includes an introductory video on protecting and restoring water quality, watershed planning guidebook, watershed planning framework, and a few examples of watershed management plans that have been developed with our grant funding. Eligible applicants. This program provides matching grants to villages, towns, and cities located along New York's coasts or designated inland waterways. Counties acting on behalf of one or more eligible municipalities are also eligible to apply for funding. Applications submitted by a county are required to submit a letter or resolution from each eligible municipality participating in the project, which demonstrates their consent and support for the application. Resources to help you determine if your municipality is located in the coastal area or along a designated inland waterway are available on the DOS Funding and Bid Opportunities website. For general planning projects, such as preparation of an LWRP or watershed management plan, an applicant must be a village, town, city, or county with the consent of or on behalf of one of or more villages, towns, or cities located along New York's coasts or designated inland waterways. To be eligible for funding for projects such as feasibility studies and design, the applicant must be currently preparing or have an approved LWRP or LWRP component. To be eligible for funding for construction projects, the applicant must have an approved or substantially completed LWRP or relevant LWRP component. Additionally, all proposed implementation projects must be located within that plan boundary. For projects which include design and construction, site control for all properties where improvements will be implemented must be established prior to the grant application due date, and proof of site control must be submitted as an attachment to your grant application. Local match requirements. State assistance requests cannot exceed 75% of the total eligible project costs with a local match requirement of 25%. However, if the project is located in an environmental justice community, the state assistance request cannot exceed 85% of the total eligible costs with a local match requirement of 15%. For the purposes of determining if a project is within a potential environmental justice area, reference the DEC mapping at the link shown here and additional guidance on determining eligibility described in the RFA. If you believe your project is eligible for the 15% local match rate, this should be clearly indicated in the budget section of the CFA and in the LWRP budget summary and detail CFA attachment. Applicants must identify the amount, type, source of eligible local match in the grant application and demonstrate that it has been secured. Failure to do so may result in a reduced award amount for qualifying applicants. When filling out your grant application, be sure to answer all the questions completely and clearly. These questions correspond to the evaluation criteria your application will be scored against. The evaluation criteria is summarized here, but described in much more detail in the RFA. Out of a possible 100 points, DOS is responsible for awarding up to 80 points, and the Regional Economic Development Councils are responsible for awarding up to 20 points depending on the degree to which the proposed project advances the RADC strategic plan. In the CFA application, you should always click on the question requirement link next to each question for tips on what should be covered in your response. This will help you write a stronger grant application. I'll go through some of these evaluation criteria now in more detail. DOS is celebrating the 40th anniversary of its New York State Coastal Management Program, which paved the way for the creation of our LWRP program by encouraging more coastal communities to prepare LWRPs or update an approved LWRP. LWRPs empower waterfront communities to evaluate local waterfront resources, develop goals and a comprehensive strategy for the best use of resources, proactively plan for current and future climate hazards exacerbated by climate change, propose future projects, and adopt a local program that will guide economic development, community resilience, sustainability, and smart growth, all while protecting natural and cultural resources. This year, we are prioritizing funding for planning and implementation projects to achieve more resilient waterfront communities. New York communities are increasingly vulnerable to more intense and frequent rain events, extreme heat, drought, and greater flooding and shoreline erosion caused by heavy rain, runoff, intense winds, and wave action. To help address these issues, DOS encourages the submission of planning projects to prepare an LWRP update or LWRP component to assist communities with becoming more resilient to climate risks and identify resiliency projects. Implementation projects seeking funding should utilize resilience measures to reduce risks, such as shoreline management projects that use natural and nature-based features and incorporate consideration of sea level rise, storm surge, erosion, flooding in project design to make projects on public property or public facilities more resilient. Water quality implementation projects. DOS has worked with many communities across the state to develop watershed management plans which identify priority actions and best management practices needed to address water quality impairments or threats to our waters. DOS is encouraging submission of design and implementation projects recommended in watershed management plans funded by the department, which can improve watershed health and resilience to both environmental and human disturbances. Here's a few examples of projects that we have funded in the past. Creating a boat wash station for watercraft inspections to prevent the spread of invasive species. Reconnecting waterways to their floodplain, providing both flood resiliency and water quality benefits. And replacing undersized culverts, which can reduce damage to roads and properties while also benefiting stream health and fish passage. Accessibility. Well-designed waterfront public spaces are accessible and inclusive. DOS is promoting grant applications for projects which create safe and inviting public waterfront destinations and facilities which prioritize accessibility in their design. Project design should incorporate ADA standards and other creative solutions which go beyond ADA standards to maximize accessibility to make public spaces and facilities more inclusive and usable for as many people as possible, regardless of differences in ability, and allow all visitors equal access to the waterfront. For example, inclusion of ADA accessibility, entryways, walkways, comfort stations, boat launches, and site furnishing, such as seating and tables that accommodate wheelchair users, age-friendly features, amenities appropriate to the varied capabilities of all users, including individuals with cognitive, communicative, social or emotional and sensory disabilities, and multilingual or pictorial wayfinding signage. Public outreach and engagement. If awarded funding for community planning and design projects, DOS expects a robust community outreach and engagement process. Grantees for planning projects will be required to prepare a public participation plan that aims to engage a diverse cross-section of the community and stakeholders in the planning process. Outreach during LWRP or watershed management plan development typically includes at least 3 public meetings, events, as well as other ways to engage the community. For projects which include design, grantees are expected to hold at least 1 public meeting to solicit feedback on the conceptual design alternatives. Here's a few points of our evaluation criteria that I wanted to highlight. The application will ask to describe the public outreach and engagement process and techniques that will be utilized to ensure comprehensive public participation and input. So here we're looking for how you're going to involve people directly impacted by the proposed project. How are you going to get their input? What are the different techniques, virtual, in-person, charrettes, open houses, focus groups, tagging onto other public events, intercept surveys, just to name a few. We'll also be looking for applicants to describe how the public outreach and engagement process will address diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility. So in this category, we will be looking for your public engagement plan to discuss how you're going to invite your entire community into the planning process. For example, if your community includes a large number of immigrants, make immigrant-oriented local print and electronic media as an integral component to your communication strategy, and make public meetings locations accessible to immigrant communities by holding them in neighborhoods where immigrant residents live and close to public transportation. Diversity can also include diversity of income, age, and education. For demonstration support from stakeholders directly impacted by the project, this can be described in the application and may also include letters of support from stakeholder groups that will directly benefit from the project, not just political representatives. Scope of work. Applicants will be asked to clearly define what is to be done, where and how it will be done, who will do it, and when it will be completed. You'll be asked to identify a clear set of discrete tasks that show a logical approach for project completion and demonstrate sufficient experience and ability of key project personnel to successfully carry out the project. Generic work plans, which describe the tasks necessary to prepare LWRPs, a watershed management plan, or complete a design and construction project, are available on the DOS website shown here. These can be used as reference, but while this is a resource, we are looking for you to provide your own specific details regarding how this will be tailored to your project. And finally, the budget is worth up to 20 points in our scoring criteria. You will need to clearly and completely justify the funding amount being requested and the local match sources. Explain how the budget was determined and the methods used to arrive at estimates, and describe how the project will be monitored over the course of the project to ensure that it remains within the proposed budget. Make sure all components of the budget criteria listed here are addressed in the application to receive full points. These also appear under the questions requirements link in the application, as well as in the RFA. Additionally, applicants are encouraged to submit an itemized cost estimate as an attachment to your application to help demonstrate the proposed costs are realistic and do not contain extraneous or ineligible expenses. The full RFA is available on the DOS Funding and Bid Opportunities website shown at the top of the slide. Again, all applicants should read through the RFA thoroughly for more details on program requirements, as these may change from year to year. Additional grant application resources, as well as both LWRP's webinars, will be included on this website as well.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Along with the webinars that will be included on the website, our funding and bidding website that is listed here, and I also put it in the chat along with some other web links to resources. You'll also find on that page a new instructional video that was just posted about the LWRP and what the LWRP is, so take a look at that as well. So as I mentioned, questions that we don't touch on here have to be submitted by June 16th via email or to the mailing address that's shown here on the slide. And just note that we can't respond to questions that are submitted by telephone, social media, or by contacting DOS staff directly by email or telephone. It has to be sent to the web or the email address here, opd@dos.ny.gov. And when you are submitting your question by email, just clearly indicate in the subject the RFA number. So that would be 23-LWRP-01 and RFA questions. And if you could, in your question, if you could be as specific as possible to the RFA, what page number your question is in reference to, a paragraph number would be great so that we can narrow down what your question is. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So let me scroll up and see what we've got. So the first question was, can we apply for program funds independent of the CFA, or does it need to be submitted through the CFA? So the answer to that is it does need to be submitted through the CFA. The web link is here on the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to put that web link right into the chat right now. So it does need to be submitted through the CFA portal.
And as noted there as well, the due date for all applications is July 28th at 4 p.m. sharp. So please make sure you get your applications in by then. If you're able to, I would suggest submitting it the day before or early in that day, just to make sure it goes through and you have enough time.
Yeah, the portal can sometimes get bogged down if there's a lot of people on there right at 3:59. So next question, can this type of grant be used to purchase lakefront land to expand a town park and preserve the land as forever wilds?
Our grant program does not fund land acquisition, so we can't provide state funds for land acquisition. However, if you have a project, design and construction project, say you're building a waterfront park on the property, you can use that acquisition as match for our grant program, but it must have been purchased within 3 years.
Right. So it has to be purchased within 3 years of the contract start date. I believe that's the deadline there. Okay.
And that information should be in our RFA as well, if you want to take a look at it.
Okay, so next question is there a place online without going into the portal where we can see all the questions we need to answer for the application? And yes, there is, and I'm gonna try and pull up that website now. On the REDC website, there is a process guide, and you can go to that page, and there should be a link on there, which includes, you can get all of the questions to any CFA program prior to going into the actual portal itself. I'm hoping that's the right website. I can't open it up right now because I'm sharing my screen, but there is on the REDC page, you can go in there and look at all of the questions. There's the questions, and then a link to the webinar as well. The recorded webinar. So next question, would a grant application for an ADA accessible kayak launch at a DEC owned launch facility be eligible for LWRP funding? So generally, yes, that could be funded. You would need to specify ownership and site control and coordination with the DEC. So we have done some projects where we have enhanced a launch on a state-owned property that has a relationship with, the community. So that could be a potential project.
Yeah. I think the caveat there would be as long as it meets all the other eligibility criteria in our RFA as well. And then we would like to see a letter of support from the DEC as well in that particular case.
Okay, next question. Is site control critical to a feasibility study type project as studying a waterfront trail extension, which could consider site control and future maintenance as factors to be studied?
Yes, we would encourage any feasibility study, in particular for trail design, to explore the different routes of trails and the site control that would be necessary to gain in order to make that trail feasible. That is an allowable expense within a feasibility study project. At the time of application, since the project wouldn't include design and construction, you wouldn't be required to have site control at the time of application. You'd be exploring that within the bounds, the scope of work of your feasibility study.
Okay, so I see we're right at time at 10:30. I'm gonna try, there's a couple more questions here. We'll see if we can get through them really quickly. Do implementation projects have to be from an LWRP, or can it be another project like from a DRI or BOA that takes place on a waterfront property?
Yeah, I think as long as it's consistent with your LWRP, it could be eligible for our funding. Again, with the caveat that it meets all the eligibility requirements listed in our RFA.
Right, so it would have to be based on what's in the application and the connection that you make to the LWRP that you have. And is there a way to connect with past or present applicants who have received this grant before? We have a project that we would like to work with others on. So on our funding and bidding page, you will see a list of the previous applicants. And you can see what the applicants applied for and what their, or the grantees, the awarded applications. So you could reach out to them as well. That list is on our funding and bidding page. And if an implementation project is in the waterfront revitalization area but is not a specific recommendation of the LWRP, would it still be eligible for funding? So again, that's similar to the answer before, is if it aligns and supports the LWRP, it doesn't need to be specifically listed in the LWRP, but it has to support the goals, the objectives, and the vision of that waterfront plan. So you would need to make that case in the question about, how does this apply to the LWRP and how does it support your local waterfront revitalization program? So while it doesn't have to be specifically listed, it does need to show that it supports the LWRP and the LWRP supports the project. So we have gone over just a little bit. We will be posting, the answers to these questions as well in our question and answers, which will be posted on July 7th. Thank you for all the questions. They were great. And we'll be answering those probably a little bit more eloquently in the written word when you see them on July 7th. So, and then again, if you have additional questions that come to mind, please don't hesitate to send those in to the opd@dos.gov email. And I really appreciate you spending the time with us this morning and the questions, and good luck with your applications. We look forward to getting them. So thank you again and have a great rest of your day.